Welcome. In today's session, we are going to look at the pituitary gland, also known as the hypophysis cerebri. And by the end of this session, we should state the parts of the pituitary gland, and you should know the histological organization of each and every part of the pituitary gland. Welcome all. My name is Suwaris Munyere, and I'm the Yure Daktari. Welcome. So, let's start with the pituitary gland. So, the pituitary gland, or the hypophysis cerebri, it is a small endocrine gland that lies in the hypophyseal fossa, or the sera tussica of the sphenoid bone. It is about the size of a pea. Okay, you can imagine how small it is, but very important. And it is usually suspended from the floor of the third ventricle of the brain by the infundibulum, or the pituitary stalk. That infundibulum is just a connecting stalk. The hypophysis cerebri, it is called the master. It is the master of endocrine glands, as its secretion from the pituitary gland influence the activity of most of the endocrine glands in the body. So secretions from the pituitary gland, they usually influence the hormonal secretion from most of the endocrine glands. But one thing which I usually say, even the master can be controlled. So even the pituitary gland is usually controlled, and it is controlled by the hypothalamus. So despite it being the master of endocrine glands, it is also controlled. Please remember that. So here we are. This is a histological organization. This part here, this is the adenohypophysis, okay, on the anterior lobe of pituitary gland. This is the posterior lobe, or the neurohypophysis. Okay, let's look at those parts. Now, parts of the pituitary gland. It is usually divided into two functional components: adenohypophysis, or the anterior lobe, that consists of glandular epithelium, and neurohypophysis, or the posterior lobe, that consists of neurosecretory tissue. Now, adenohypophysis has three parts, namely pars distalis, pars intermedia, and pars tuberalis, with the pars tuberalis forming a sheath around the infundibulum. The infundibulum is part of the neurohypophysis. Neurohypophysis also has three parts: pars nervosa, the infundibulum, and the median eminence. Okay, the infundibulum has a tract known as hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. So you can know those axons. They are axons whose cell bodies lie in the hypothalamus. Okay, so that tract originates from the hypothalamus and terminates in the neurohypophysis. So it is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Okay, please remember these parts, each of the parts. Okay, now let's look. Here is a diagrammatic representation. This is the anterior lobe, the pars distalis. Okay, remember, these are the parts of now adenohypophysis, pars distalis. Then this cleft here, known as the intraglandular cleft. Here you can see a cleft. Now, the part of the adenohypophysis that is posterior to the intraglandular cleft is known as the pars intermedia. And then we have this, which is forming a collar around the infundibulum, known as the pars tuberalis. Okay, then we have parts of the neurohypophysis: pars nervosa, infundibulum, and the median eminence, which is somewhere here, shown here. Okay, this is your pars anterior, is your pars distalis. Call it pars distalis. Pars intermedia, between the pars intermedia and pars distalis, we have the intraglandular cleft. Then we have this, which is forming a collar or a sheath around the infundibulum, known as the pars tuberalis. Then parts of the neurohypophysis are the pars nervosa, the infundibulum, and the median eminence. Okay, here we are. Now, pituitary gland has adenohypophysis and neurohypophysis, or the anterior lobe and posterior lobe. Now, the anterior lobe, from embryology, we learn that it usually developed from the Rathke's pouch, which is a diverticulum from the stomodium, an upward diverticulum from the stomodium, and stomodium is ectodermal in origin, Now, parts of the adenohypophysis, pars distales, pars intermedia, pars tubularis. Neurohypophysis, which usually develop from the neuroectoderm of the floor of the third ventricle, pars nervosa, infundibulum, and the median eminence. So, pituitary gland, its embryological origin is ectodermal in nature, because neuroectoderm originated from the ectoderm. Remember ectoderm? During nenuration, ectoderm will form surface ectoderm and the neuroectoderm. Okay, so pituitary gland, essentially it is ectodermal in origin. Now let's look at adenohypophysis, which has three parts: pars distales, pars intermedia, pars tubularis. The reason I'm repeating this because they will ask you this. Okay, and now this is a very important point. The supporting cells of the adenohypophysis are known as the folliculosterate cells. Please remember that. Folliculosterate cells are the supporting cells of your adenohypophysis. Now let's look at pars distales. Now, pars distales usually consist of cords of cells, which are usually separated by fenestrated sinusoids. Now, several types of cells responsible for production of different hormones are usually present here. Now, these cells are grouped according to their staining properties. Some cells take up the stain, are brightly staining. Those are known as the chromophile cells. Chromophile cells. Phil means love. They love stain. Okay, so they are brightly staining. Then we have chromophobe cells. They hate stain. They are lightly staining. Now you can see here there are some, like these cells are chromophiles. Okay, chromophiles, and you can see, even though we are saying chromophiles, there are some which are purple, others are pink. Okay, you will see the reason why. Then we have other cells like this one. It is not taking up the stain. This one here, it is not taking up the stain. It is a chromophobe. Then here you can see that these cells are arranged in cords, and between these cords you have sinusoids. Okay, this is a sinusoid. So this is a sinusoid. You can see the red blood cells there. Now let's look at the chromophile cells. They have brightly stained granules, and the chromophile cells are of two types. They can either be basophiles, which make up 10%, or acidophils, which make up 40%. Now, basophiles, their granules usually stain with basic dyes such as hematoxylin. Okay, hence they are blue colored, and also they also stain with the periodic acid chief stain, the pars stain. So they are pars positive. So they are blue purple, like these ones. These are basophiles. These are basophiles. Blue purple. Okay, blue purple. Then acidophils, their granules usually stained with acidic dyes such as eosine. Hence they are pink colored, like this. This one here, this one here, this one here, here, here. Those are your acidophils. Okay, these are your basophils. These are your acidophils. Please remember that. Then acidophils, the ones which were pink, these ones. You can see there are very many here. These ones. Now they are of two types. Acidophils, they can either be somatotrophs or lactotrophs. The other name of lactotrophs is mammotrophs. Now, somatotrophs, they usually constitute 50% of the anterior pituitary and produce the growth hormone or somatotropin. Growth hormone, somatotropin, which usually regulate body growth before puberty. Now, in some people, there might be excess secretion, which will cause gigantism in children. So, if the somatotrophs produce somatotropin in excess during childhood, that will lead to gigantism. And what if they overproduce when one is an adult? So oversecretion of somatotropin when one is an adult leads to acromegaly. Please remember this. Gigantism in children acromegaly in adults. Lactotrophs, or the mammotrophs, they constitute 15 to 20% of the anterior pituitary and produce prolactin. Now, during pregnancy and lactation, these lactotrophs usually undergo hypertrophy and result in increased size of the pituitary gland, especially in multiparous females. So, in multiparous females or females with more than one child or with many children, you find that their pituitary gland is slightly larger than nulliparous women or even men. Okay. So please remember there are two types of acidophils, somatotrophs, lactotrophs. Know their respective hormones and the action of those hormones. Basophils, the purple, the blue purple, this one, these ones here. Okay. They are of three types. They can either be corticotrophs, gonadotrophs, and thyrotrophs. Now, corticotrophs usually constitute about 15 to 20% of the anterior pituitary and usually secrete adrenocorticotropic hormone. Adrenocorticotropic hormone acts on your adrenal cortex and to stimulate the production of cortisol. Okay. Then you have gonadotrophs. They usually constitute about 10% of the anterior pituitary and they secrete luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone in female, remember, it will induce ovulation and also the follicle stimulating hormone. We will, at the end of this, we will look at the action of these hormones in another slide. Thyrotrophs. They constitute about 5% of the anterior pituitary and they secrete thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone will stimulate your thyroid to produce thyroxine. Then we have pars intermedia, the second part of the adenohypophysis, which is usually located between pars distalis and pars nervosa. Now, it is not well developed in humans. It usually contain a series of colloid-filled vesicles. These are your colloid-filled vesicles. Now, the cells of the vesicles are basophils and the chromophobes. So, these cells here are either basophils or chromophobes, no acidophils here. Now, those cells usually secrete, please remember this, melanocyte stimulating hormone, okay? Please remember the pars intermedia secretes melanocyte stimulating hormone that stimulates production of skin pigments by the melanocyte. So it usually stimulates the melanocyte to produce melanin. So if there is a tumor which makes the pars intermedia to oversecrete the melanocyte stimulating hormone, there will be hyperpigmentation. Okay, you find that skin, the individual skin will be hyperpigmented. There will be very much pigmentation. Then we have pars tubularis, the last part of adenohypophysis, which is just an extension of the anterior pituitary that usually wraps around the infundibular stalk. It has a high vascular, it is a region of it is a high vascular region and has the primary capillary plexus of the hypothalamo-hypophyseal-portal system. Please remember this. And please don't confuse the hypothalamo-hypophyseal-portal system with the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. This is a portal system. Okay? It is a vascular system. But the other one, those is a tract. Those are axons of neurons. Then pars tubularis consist of small cluster of cords of cells. Those they are both acidophils and basophils. So this is the portal system, the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. There is usually a primary capillary plexus here, which lies in the pars tubularis, and its blood comes from the superior hypophyseal artery, a branch from the internal carotid artery, and we form a capillary plexus here, the primary capillary plexus. Then we will have veins such as this, the long hypophyseal portal veins and the short hypophyseal portal veins, which drain blood from the primary capillary plexus to the secondary capillary plexus. Okay, then the secondary capillary plexus is drained by some veins which drain into the cavernous sinus. So hormones that regulate the anterior pituitary from the hypothalamus. They usually enter the bloodstream at the primary capillary plexus. Then they are carried by the hypophyseal portal veins, and where they will regulate the production of the hormones from the anterior pituitary lobe. Okay. Then those hormones, once secreted, they are carried to the cavernous sinus and to the parts of the body on which they will act on. Now, here we have the hypothalamic regulating hormones. Remember, the master is also controlled. So here we have growth hormone releasing hormone, which stimulates the somatotrophs to produce growth hormone. So this hormone is produced in the hypothalamus. Then it enters the primary capillary plexus, then carried by the hypophyseal portal veins. Then it reaches the secondary capillary plexus, and then it will affect the somatotrophs to produce growth hormone. Then somatostatin inhibits the somatotrophs to produce growth hormone. Dopamine inhibits lactotrophs to produce prolactin. Corticotropin releasing hormone stimulates corticotrophs to produce adrenocorticotropic hormone. Gonadotropin releasing hormone stimulates gonadotrophs to release both follicle stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone. Thyrotropin releasing hormone stimulates thyrotrophs to release the thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so please remember that these hormones here up, okay, these ones, except dopamine, which can be classified as a neurotransmitter, these ones are factors which are released from the hypothalamus, and they influence the anterior pituitary to produce these hormones, and they are carried by the hypothalamo-hypophyseal portal system. Let's do neurohypophysis. It consists of pars nervosa in the infundibulum and also the median eminence. It consists of non-myelinated axons of neurosecretory neurons. Now, the bodies or the soma of these neurons are usually located in the supraoptic and the paraventricular nuclei of hypothalamus. So, the bodies of these neurons are located in those nuclei. The axons do not synapse with any other neurons. Okay. Now, those axons, I will show you a diagram. Those axon terminal secrete neurosecretory vesicles into adjacent fenestrated capillaries. Now, please note this: posterior lobe of pituitary gland is a storage site of neurosecretions of the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei. Okay, so posterior lobe of pituitary gland is just a storage site, just the storage, no production there, just the storage. Now, and please remember, the supporting cells of the neurohypophysis are known as pipicytes. Now, a continuation, the neurohypophysis is associated with the release of blood, is associated with the release into the blood of two hormones. The two hormones include vasopressin, also known as the antidiuretic hormone, which usually control the absorption of water by kidney tubules, and oxytocin, which usually control the contraction of smooth muscle, and also usually influence the myoepithelial cells of the breast to produce milk for milk secretion. Now, these two hormones are not produced in the hypophysis cerebri at all. They are usually synthesized in the neurons located in the cell bodies of the neurons located mainly in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus. Now, this is a very important point. Vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone is produced in the supraoptic nucleus, and oxytocin is produced in your paraventricular nucleus. These secretions, which are bound to a protein known as neurophysin, pass down the axons of the neurons concerned. Okay. Then in the axoplasm, hormone is in the form of secretory vesicles and reaches the axon terminus in the pars posterior or your pars nervosa. Then the correction of these secretory vesicles at the terminal portion of the axonal processing is called as herring bodies. So these secretory granules are usually stored in the terminal end of the axon, which has a dilatation known as the herring body. Here they are usually released into the capillaries of the region and enter the general circulation. So to summarize that with a diagram, now you can see here supraoptic nucleus, which will release your antidiuretic hormone. Then the hormone is bound to a protein known as neurophysin. Then it is transported. Then it is stored at this terminal end. You can see they are dilated, the herring bodies. Okay, then oxytocin is produced by the oxytocin is produced by the paraventricular, transported the same. Now this is the hypothalamo-hypophyseal tract. Then it is stored in the herring bodies. Okay, as shown here, hormone synthesized in the neuron in the hypothalamus. Hormone passes through axon in the infundibulum to reach pars posterior of the pars nervosa. Then, once needed, the hormone passes into hypophyseal veins. Okay. Herring bodies, these are correction of secretory vesicles in the dilated terminal portion of axon in the neurohypophysis. Here is a herring body. And these nucleus are the nucleus of the supporting cells of the neurohypophysis known as the pituicytes. But this is a herring body. Okay, now let's look at the action of these hormones. Now the hypothalamus, remember, it will influence the anterior pituitary to produce this hormone. The adrenocorticotropin hormone acts on the adrenal cortex to produce cortisol. Then also it produces the thyroid stimulating hormone to produce T4 is your thyroxine or your then, and T3 is your triiodothyronine. Then FSH in males, FSH influences the testes to produce inhibin. The inhibin is produced by the Sertoli cells. Then RH stimulates those cells, the interstitial cells of Rayleigh to produce testosterone. Then FSH in females stimulates the ovary to produce estrogen, and RH, the RH influences the corpus luteum to produce progesterone. Okay, these hormones, they have a negative feedback mechanism. They inhibit both anterior pituitary and hypothalamus once produced. Then posterior pituitary is the storage of ADH, which influences the kidney for water deabsorption. Oxytocin influences both the uterus and the mammary gland. In the uterus causes contraction. In the mammary gland, milk production and secretion. In the mammary gland, it usually influences the myoepithelial cells. Then prolactin produced in the anterior pituitary also influences the breast acinite to produce milk. Then growth hormone produced in the anterior pituitary influences your bones, okay, for growth. So let's look at a summary. Now this is your pars distalis, pars intermedia, neurohypophysis, your pars nervosa. Here you can see red. These pink cells are your acidophils. The blue purple are your basophils. These are your choroids. Okay, and please remember, pars intermedia produces the melanocyte stimulating hormone. Pars nervosa, you can see the herring bodies. Okay, and then these nuclei belong to the pituicytes. Please remember the supporting cells of the pars distalis or the adenohypophysis are the folliculostriate cells. Okay. So summary: pituitary gland, adenohypophysis, neurohypophysis. Adenohypophysis, 3 parts: pars distalis, pars tuberalis, pars intermedia. I've written for you melanocyte stimulating hormone. past studies has chromophiles and chromophobes. Chromophiles are the ones which produce the hormones, and they are either acidophils or your basophils. Even I've indicated their color pink. These ones look blue purple. Acidophils can also be called alpha cells, and they are of two types: somatotrophs, lactotrophs. They produce growth hormones. These ones, prolactin. Basophils, 3, corticotrophs, gonadotrophs, thyrotrophs. This one produce the adrenocorticotropin hormone. Gonadotrophs, they either produce luteinizing hormone or the follicle stimulating hormone. Thyrotrophs produce thyroid stimulating hormone. Neurohypophysis is the storage state of the antidiuretic hormone and oxytocin. Okay, thank you for your attention, guys, and please subscribe for more anatomy and biochemistry content. Thank you.